So my name is John Fultz, for those who don't know me. I'm with the user interface group. User interface group does, can everybody hear me fine? Yeah, so the user interface group works on the Mathematica front end. We work on a bunch of mobile apps, some of which we've shipped out the door, some of which are still under development, and the under development ones you're going to hear about in some other talks. Gosh, it seems like lately it seems like there's nothing I don't have my fingers in. But I'm going to focus this talk just on the Mathematica desktop front end, or Wolfram desktop if that's your flavor. If you've attended talks that I've given in the past, a lot of times I'm showing shiny new demos of things that you can't use because we haven't shipped them yet. I decided to mix it up a bit and show you some shiny demos of things that you can use today. Yes, it's because I'm kind of out of shiny demos of stuff that doesn't work. But I still have a few ideas of things that we might want to discuss at the end. OK, so let's get started. Well, of course, the big victory lap for our group is multiple undo. Thank you. Cheap applause. I love it. Well, it wasn't that cheap. It was a lot of effort, but I'll take it. So this was a hard problem for us to solve, and I won't belabor you with all of the details. But there are a few things that kind of affect how we implemented it and how you end up using it in the product. And so I did want to talk a little bit about those. So Stephen alluded to this a little bit yesterday in his talk. One of the things that's an interesting challenge is that we have really two notions of history. There is the kernel, which is a strictly chronological history. It's, every time you press Shift-Enter, something new happens. And it kind of doesn't matter where on the screen you do that, and it might replace some existing stuff. The front end is the more traditional undo problem of, I type someplace at some point in time, and then I want to be able to undo that. But one of the things that we realized early on, actually not quite at the beginning, but when we started to have an undo feature that came up and was starting to work, was that it was very confusing if we were to undo evaluations. When I say undo evaluations, we're not literally undoing kernel state, but we're undoing the effect in your notebook. And it was very easy to kind of lose track of what's going on. And in your head, you're trying to think, I want to undo back to a particular point, but you couldn't figure out if you were at that point or not. And one of the big indicators of that one of the big things that you might want to achieve is you might want to undo to a point where, for a given input and output, that the inputs and outputs correspond to one another. And so we came up with a fairly interesting solution to that. And I have to say, this is something that I'm almost as proud of as multiple undo itself. It's something that if you've been using version 10, you probably have seen. So if I start typing here, if I start to add, wow. Tell you what, let me come out of slideshow mode. This may be turned off for slideshow mode here. There we go. OK. Yeah. So if I should have checked that beforehand. So if I start typing here, it dims down the output. And what does that mean? That means that the input and the output are no longer in sync. So easy enough. And that means that when I'm undoing, if I undo my keystrokes, I can kind of figure out now get a really easy visual cue of whether this is the point maybe where I should stop pressing Command Z or Control Z or not. But the interesting thing is this is actually kind of useful in a number of other ways. And one of the things that I always want to do is, I go and I like reformat my code or something like that. I insert some new lines. And previously, whenever I've done that, it always takes away my cell labels here. And I want to know, did I make any changes that actually affect the output? And it's actually telling me this here. So it's telling me that this new line isn't going to affect the output in any way. And if I type a comment, it's going to grade down. And then when I close the comment, once again, it knows this doesn't affect the output in any way, so it restores my color. So now, to be clear, it's not actually communicating with the kernel. This is about whether or not whether or not the front end is actually sending something different to the kernel. So if I were to retype if I retype that typeset pi there as the symbol pi, that is going to stay gray because we're actually sending different stuff to the kernel. So, useful feature. Let me drop back in here. So, in fact, kind of subtle visual indicators to make multiple undo a lot easier to use, but it turns out to be useful otherwise. Now, one of the other challenges is that sometimes you have stuff that's going on simultaneously inside the front end. And it might not be, in terms of the time that it pops into the notebook, that might not define the sequence in which you actually want to undo operations. What does that mean? So let me just show a quick example here. I have a slow computation, which is going to be spitting out multiple cells here. And so I'm going to start that running, and I'm going to make another cell here and keep typing while this evaluation is running. And we'll go ahead and let that finish here. So if we were looking strictly at chronology, then what you would expect to happen is a bunch of bouncing around when I do multiple undo. And that's not so pleasant. And that's not what we do. So what we do, you see it undoes my typing, and then it undoes the evaluation in one fell swoop. I mean, do you really want to undo individual cells of the evaluation? No. So it just undoes it in one fell swoop, and we can put it all back in there as well. So this is another one of those things where the challenge of the front end, the challenge of working in Mathematica, makes multiple undo not so straightforward. And as you can imagine, this might actually lead to inconsistencies where undo might potentially get confused because we're attempting to do things in a sensible order. Undo, it might turn into a pathological problem for undo. But the way that we implemented undo, it has a bunch of internal consistency checks. It's actually hashing bits of the notebook at the various undo stages, so that if undo is about to do something that corrupts your notebook, it stops. It knows that it's about to do something dangerous. It stops. It backs out. And so you may find yourself sometimes pressing undo, and then it'll start beeping on you, and it won't undo anymore, and you'll be like, what happened to my undo stack? It's because undo knows that if it were to keep going, it might damage your notebook, and it's not going to do that. So we've had enough experience damaging notebooks in the past. Didn't want to introduce new causes. So normally mouse-click interfaces don't undo. what do I mean by mouse click interfaces? I mean like sliders, checkboxes, pop-up menus, that sort of thing. And if you type inside an input field, that's going to undo, of course. But if I move my slider around and then I press Command Z on my Macintosh once, that didn't register and undo. It just undoes the evaluation that created that in the first place. So I think that's pretty sensible, what most people expect. But one of the things that we discovered is that sometimes these user interfaces are not what you expect. I mean, they may not feel like using a user interface. They may feel like editing in some way. And the big thing where this came up for us was the control equal interface. We eat our own dog food, and we built the control equal interface out of first-class Mathematica user interface controls. And so we needed some way to be able to tie into the undo system. And so we added this option called undo track variables. I mean, I mentioned this. This is sort of a minor thing for a Keynote level presentation. But if you need it, you'll be glad I mentioned it. And so so here, once again, same thing that I did before, but now I undo, undo, undo. So now that slider is part of the undo stack. So like I said, a minor thing, but if you need it, you'll be glad that you came to this talk. So another thing that I'm really happy with, and I think it says something about how the desktop front end continues to progress, is some of the very sophisticated systems which are built in the front end. And so in version 10, the stuff that you're seeing, and some of this stuff has already been demoed a bit, and there's going to be some more talks on some of it as well. So testing notebooks, this is a system that very heavily relies on the front end, and I'm not going to steal from Raj's talk. Raj is giving a talk on Friday, but I will just point out this is the unit testing functionality, which we included as a part of version 10, where you can type in your unit test and get your green bar there. And Stephen demoed this, and Raj will do much more. But that's a system that very heavily relies on the front end. The Wolfram Programming Lab, which Stephen demoed and came up in a talk that Conrad gave yesterday as well, and possibly some others, is another system that's built in the desktop front end. And these things are built using public interfaces and using things that that anyone here could write with enough study of the documentation. The template notebooks I wanted to discuss a little bit, because I was going through the schedule and I noticed I don't think there's a talk on this. So I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I did have some examples that I had written for another talk, and so let me just talk about that briefly. So what is a template notebook? I mean, this is report generation. This is the idea that you want to be able to programmatically plug in things into notebooks, and it gets more sophisticated than that as well. You might be able to want to be able to run code run code contextually inside a bit of the notebook. You might want to have something that loops within the notebook and creates a series of content cells. And so let me open up this example here, example 2. Why is it example 2? Because I forgot to change the 2 for a 1 when I copied this from another talk. Not because I missed something here. OK, so this is an example template notebook. And I mean, you can get a fresh one. Once again, file, new template notebook. But this is one that I built, and so let me just discuss a little bit of what we've done here. So first of all, it's a real notebook. You're just doing anything in the notebook that you want to. I have right here, I have a section cell, I have a text cell down here. Now, they happen to have some programmatic content in them. And so in this case, this is some programmatic content here, this guy here, which basically is going to evaluate in place date string. And the result will come back. It'll be plugged right in there. So that's generic Mathematica code. In this case, this is going to evaluate something which is going to grab data from the data that I'm inserting into the template. If we look at the code that I'm setting up here, so I have an association that has these two things: currency list and name. So these are keys which are going to be plugged in to this particular template here. So in this case, this is just taking the key, or taking the value for the key name. It's just going to plug it in right there. And this is just taking the value for the key currency list. It's plugging in right there. And OK, well, this is kind of ugly. You know, am I really going to have an input cell coming out? No, because one of the things I can do with input cells is I can control their behavior. So this menu right here allows me to, with a particular input cell, attach a behavior to it. And the behavior that I've attached to both of the input cells that you're seeing here actually is evaluate and delete. And so in this case, this is going to evaluate. I've put a semicolon in on the end, so it's not going to turn into an output. This one is going to evaluate and delete as well, and most of these things have semicolons except for the last one. So this is actually going to produce a panel in the output. OK, and so let's actually then switch back and run our template. So here's the data that I'm going to stick in. And then we'll go ahead and run it. And this is going to take just a little bit to run because it's going out on the internet. I'm actually fetching today's currency exchange rates. So this document is generated just for you. And so here we go. Now I actually define things in a loop, so I have multiple slides here. I have the euro exchange rates, I have the dollar exchange rates, and the yen, and the pound sterling, and the ruble. There we go. So this was, now this is kind of interesting. It's sitting here in a slideshow. How did I do this? Well, like I said, we're just dealing with regular notebooks. And if we go back into the regular notebook and take a look, and we'll see that, that this notebook, too, is just a slideshow. And it's a little hidden because of the styles that are used here. But you can see right there at the bottom, it's telling us slide 0 of 1. And so the way that I set this up was I just had a slide break inside the repeating block. And so that's how I generated my automatic slideshow. But the point being, there's nothing magic about slideshows. Any feature of notebooks that you want to use for template notebooks, they're there. Because template notebooks, in the end, are just notebooks. Ian Hojnicki talked a little bit about this at one of the talks yesterday. I'm not going to go into the level of detail that he did, but I want to point out that one of the major features of version 10 is that we're now integrated. The front end is now integrated into the cloud file system. So anything that you do in the cloud platform, it's available for you right there in the desktop. And opening and saving these files are first-class operations. We do have to have a separate menu item simply because we need to know whether you're targeting the cloud or the desktop. but I'm already logged in here. If I hadn't been logged in, it would have asked me to log in. That is a little bit slower than we'd like for it to be. We're still working on the performance there, but it's pretty solid stuff. I can navigate the file hierarchy however I want to. I can open up things right off the cloud file system. So that's going to open up. I can come in here and I can make my changes. And now, because we totally understand that we're dealing with the cloud file system, if I just do Command S, it's going to go right back, and you'll see, well, the full screen stuff kind of flipped around on me, but you see that we have the monitor that shows us that we just push stuff back to the server. So first class operations, and we do this queuing of files being pushed up to the server intelligently, which is to say that if you try to quit Mathematica before you've pushed up, we'll stop you and let you know we're still doing work. If you queue up the same file several times, we'll just take the last instance of the thing in that queue. So it's intelligent queuing of files going through the server. But otherwise, when you do save, you don't have to wait for the save operation to happen. You can keep on going, and that's OK. So we did some more improvements to Code Assist. Code Assist is our internal name for a collection of functionality, which a lot of which deals with automatic completions of some sort, but things which somehow help you to be able to write code faster, more accurately, better. And if you've been using version 10, you'll have seen some of these. You may or may not have appreciated some of the specifics of how these things work. Previous versions, we've been able to do completion on any individual symbol. That's fine, but we can do better than that. So now we understand lots of functions that don't take symbols, that take strings of various sorts. And so we do, if I want to save as a GIF or something like that, and I apologize, it's probably coming out a little small on the screen there. I didn't set up the magnification for this. But now I can just tab my way through that, and I get the choice that I want. And not only that, actually, let's do export instead of export string, and now I can do. Now I've got completion that's actually coming from my file system. So, and that is sensitive to functions that actually care about files. It's a lot of curation of data on our part to kind of figure out which functions should have what types of completions. We did all that work. So color function completion, this is a nice one. If I want to do color data, now I can complete the color data. That's fine, but there's this secondary choice, this choose color scheme. And now I actually have access to, you may recognize this because we have a palette that looks a lot like this, and we just embedded the palette right there in the notebook. Misclicked there. So if I want to choose pastel, and it doesn't work. I've had a couple things when I go into slideshow mode not work the way I anticipate. Let me just once again come out of slideshow mode here so I can more effectively demonstrate some of this stuff. Yeah, OK. Interesting. Well, it wouldn't be fun if this sort of thing didn't happen from time to time, right? That's OK. It worked in this very version, in this very instance of Mathematica last night. So Okay, moving on. And it works on your system. That's a guarantee from me. It works on your system. Okay. Option right-hand side completion. I like this one a lot. This is another one where we did a lot of curation. So I'm just completing to plot legends, but I can't remember what right-hand side plot legends takes. Well, look at that, expressions. That looks like something that I might be interested in. Let's set up our plot theme as well. Fine. And in this case, not only do I have a list of plot themes, but I can actually see what they look like. And so, well, that's the scientific one here. It looks sort of interesting. And so now we can do that, and it's a lot less thinking, a lot less referencing the documentation. Sometimes it's like we're reading your mind.
Can we, as a developer, can we implement any of this? Or?
Gosh, you're about 4 slides ahead of me. The brief answer, so the question was, can you as a developer access some of this stuff? And for the straightforward completions and function templates, the answer is yes, you can plug your stuff into there. In terms of function templates, we just look at standardized usage messages. But in terms of the curated stuff, not yet on our agenda. We know you want it. Okay. And the other thing that I want to point out, let me give myself a little room here below so you guys can see this, is that these completions are context sensitive. So here I have a completion for method, and this is the method indie solve, and it's giving me things like Rungekutta and BDF and close, and now I'm going to set a method for my button, and now it's giving me options like queued and preemptive. So it's in some cases, options look the same across many, many functions, but in some cases they don't. We're aware of that. So one thing that's new to version 10, we had an editor for 2D images, which we made a few improvements to, but kind of not enough to make a really shiny demo here. But we added a similar sort of editor for 3D images. And once again, this one I caught before the talk that I'm going to have to take myself out of slideshow mode again here. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so 3D images aren't new. You've seen them before, if you've been here at least. But now, if you click on one, you get a little bar at the bottom with some tools. And there's some interesting stuff going on here. We have a color function editor, which allows us to take a look at, we have our default color function, but we can choose any custom color function we want. Well, that was terrible. Let's try, okay. Well, that's for a certain kind of person, that's probably okay. But then we can also actually edit these things by hand if we want to try to filter out some of the noise and highlight certain kinds of data. And we can even add extra sliders so that we can have kind of more control over that. And we apply that, and we go up here. We also have clip planes. And this is a little awkward simply because of the size of my screen here. But so here I have a clip plane, which is defined by this interval slider. I mean, right now it's just showing the entire. Oops. Here, let me make this window a bit bigger. Okay. So right now it's defined as. We have a resolution here. Let me make the image smaller. Okay. Okay, so now I can just look at a slice of this. I can move that slice through, and I can do it in different planes as well. Once again, make the slice however thick or thin as I want, and then move it through. So, and still be able to rotate it around, do all the other things that we like, and of course, you know, we can set up multiple clipping planes if we want. I won't bore you with that, but it's really, you know, we're taking the ability to visualize the 3D image data, and we're trying to make it very, very simple. Okay. So this is one of those things that might pass unnoticed by you because it's not really, I mean, it's a feature that we had before, PDF export. But for people who've tried to rely on PDF export, you know that it's been kind of problematic for a little while, and it's been problematic because of there are some things that PDF just is not very good at that we do a lot of. I mean, PDF isn't really very good at dealing with gradients or transparency or high polygon counts. So, you know, we do this balance between trying to send things to bitmap when, you know, send things to PDF as bitmap when we have to, when PDF just can't figure it out, or trying to do a high quality sort of export. But frankly, what we did in version 9, you know, have been doing in version 8 and version 9, you know, there are a lot of people who are hoping we could do better, and this version we have. And so you can just ignore the code here, just the point being that I just made a little function which indicates some sizes, because the size of PDF is actually one of the interesting changes from version 9 to version 10. And that is just flipping out because it's, I set something up here to shell out to version 9 and run this same code, export string, and grab the size. So in version 9, if we just do an export of the expression a plus b, it's 31 kilobytes or so. And in version 10, if we do the same thing, it's 8 kilobytes. And so what we did is we actually threw away everything we were doing about PDF export before. It was just, there wasn't enough to be rescued there, and we started over from scratch. And one of the things that we support is we now support subsetting of fonts. This is actually one of the reasons why there's a big difference in this particular example, is because in version 9, we're including the math fonts, which are necessary for that plus sign there. And more of this size is font than image. And in version 10, we only include the portions of the font that are actually required to generate the image. So trying to get PDF size down. And just to show you an example, you know, if we're comparing the string alpha beta versus alpha, the difference in version 9 is very small because it already included the entire font in there. And the difference in version 10 is a little bit more modest because it's now including the spline definition for beta. So it's, you only pay the incremental cost that you actually need. In general, in terms of size, it is very often going to be a win in version 10 over version 9, and some of the sizes, you know, in version 10, I mean, I'm showing simple examples here, but some of the sizes really got unmanageably large. So this was, you know, one of the nice things when I implemented multiple undo, I went through my bug list and I went through every undo bug that I had, and there were probably about 40 of them, and I think I closed 38 of them. And PDF, same thing, except there were more bug reports than that. And we closed a whole bunch of them for version 10. And one of the really ornery things was dealing with 3D graphics. So in version 9, I mean, it's just trying to do something which is internally, which is not very reasonable for 3D graphics. I won't go into the details. And this, unfortunately, this is the one place where I'm going to break my rule a bit and say this isn't the version that you have, but this is the version that you will have very soon. I'm running the candidate for 10.02, which will be pushing out the door very, very shortly. And so you'll see this right now. There's still a bit of a problem with 3D graphics, but you'll see this coming soon. And what it's doing for 3D graphics, really because 3D graphics, that's just the worst case scenario for PDF, where if we try to do it you know, faithfully as a vector representation, you know, this is what you're going to get. And on top of that, the quality is going to suffer as well. And some, you know, you'll end up with holes in your polygons still and such. It's just a limitation of a format which was created in the early 90s and really hasn't seen much of an update since then. So what we're doing actually by default is we're throwing in 300 DPI images into here, which is generally going to be enough, but that's adjustable if you need it. So, so not a particularly shiny thing. It's an old feature, but now one that I think will work much better for you. OK. So some other features not to miss. I'm not going to spend too much time on any one of these. I don't have a demo for any of them, but I just want to, you know, these are things which you might easily not be aware of. Although if you're running a MacBook Pro with Retina display, you probably are aware that we are now finally supporting Retina displays. But if you've been waiting on buying one of the MacBook Pros because of that, now you can stop waiting. Now on the Windows side, we do, unfortunately, we don't support DPI scaling yet on the Windows side. That does affect some new Windows laptops. One of those Windows laptops that it affects is mine. So we'll get this working. But sorry, we're not there yet in shipping versions. We also have the proper full screen support, which was, I think it was introduced maybe in Leopard or something like that, the full screening of apps. And it took us a while to get on board with that, but you see me using it during this talk. Under Windows, we ditched the floating menu bar, which was a great idea in 1996, and then started to look like less of a great idea as the years went on. So we put out a new version of the front end, well, the front end of the kernel on Wolfram Desktop, which has this new licensing option, which some of you may not appreciate. You know, if you're happy with the Mathematica licensing option, that's fine. So Wolfram Desktop is part of, it comes with a subscription plan. The downside is you're paying money every month, but the upside is all you have to do is log in, and it will work. You can log in from as many computers as you want to. So, so if you're, you know, a highly portable person going from computer to computer, that's now an option for you. And at the right subscription level, that is, it has all the features, every bit as powerful as what you see in Mathematica. So we also did some updating of fonts, including unifying our numbered fonts. Not something you care about, but something that caused me a great deal of pain for 2 or 3 months. And one of the things that we also did is we added a sans serif font for mathematical stuff. So 3D inset, texture maps on filled curves. Yutsu Liu will be giving a talk later, I think it's later today, where he's going to be talking about some of this stuff. So if you're interested in that. and I talked a little bit about some improvements that we made to the 2D image editor. And then it kind of, once again, kind of a small thing, but if you've ever used file name setter, you've probably run into this limitation, and we haven't had a very good story for it. And now, now file name setter, pretty much all the issues that you probably ever ran into before are now gone. So I'm finished talking about the things that, that we shipped as part of version 10, but here I want to talk about stuff, even though I don't have shiny demos for this. Well, in some cases I do actually have working code, but I don't have shiny demos. But the reason I want to talk about this is because this is the conversation that I want to have with you. It's a little bit inconvenient for you to come up to my office 2 or 3 weeks from now. You're here, I'm here, and so if you want to talk about stuff that really matters to you, I'll just mention a few things that really matter to me, but I'd like to hear your ideas too. And so these are some things that are on my radar, and we actually have early technology or designs worked out for a number of these things. So integration with Git, if you don't know what Git is, sorry, but it's the technology behind GitHub, which you probably have heard of, and that is something that I have some real technology on my system for. Improvements in unit testing. Raj is giving a talk on Friday in unit testing. We've been helping them to implement some of that stuff, but I've taken a much bigger interest in this, and so I have some real ideas going forward here. Code assistance is something that we are always working on and trying to read your minds even better. Issues with how we deploy. I mean, there's been, for a while, there's been some questions about the CDF deployment story. And things are changing right now because the web browser plugin, let's face it, the future of the web browser plugin does not look good. We're seeing signals from pretty much all of the browser folks that that these sorts of plugins, the end is on the horizon. We see it coming. So we put a lot of effort into it, but that's okay. We have some other really strong ideas for deployment. Some of them we're already seeing today with the cloud platform, but we have some more ideas coming as well. And I know it's something that a lot of you care about. So. Digital signing maybe doesn't sound that important, but digital signing, maybe I should have written the feature that will make dynamic warnings go away. So that's what digital signing is. So a few other things in terms of some interface stuff that we're looking at. Now, this is something that we're actually shipping in undocumented experimental form right now, spreadsheet type control for handling tabular data. We have this thing called table view, and we actually snuck it in and it works. Feel free to play around with it. It's not documented yet, though, because it's not finished. Ribbons and floating interfaces. We've been building a lot of these ourselves, and we'd like for you to be able to build them too. We have a pretty good idea how that's going to work, and I think we're not very far actually from being able to deliver on some of that technology. And this was, I said, you're about 4 slides ahead. Developer control over the completions and code assist stuff. And then these are questions that we hear about. When are we going to do Cocoa? It's happening right now. We are working on this. In fact, I don't know where he is, but yes, the fellow who's working on this is apparently not here because he's working on it right now. We're also working on updating the technology under the Linux version, which runs Qt4 with a little bit of Qt3 behind it. We're upgrading that as well, and we're working on upgrading the drawing support for the Windows version, which using a technology called Direct Write. It's basically, Microsoft is very good about supporting the legacy technologies, but still they said, we have a new technology, and oh, by the way, we have all these new features which are only available in the new technologies. So, so we're looking at acceleration for 2D drawing and some much better font rendering. It really makes a huge difference. And so that is something that, if you're wondering why that's not done yet, it's because Ian came to the talk. And then your ideas. I'm serious about this. You know, I go onto the community and to Stack Exchange, and I want to hear what you guys are talking about, and I'm here right now. Come to talk to me. And so I'll just plug a few other talks. Jason Harris is doing a workshop on typesetting. Jason's right there right after this talk is over in the other room. I mentioned that Yutsu is going to be giving a talk on graphics. Chris Carlson is giving a talk on integration with Rhino. This is kind of a design-oriented talk, and that actually I think I'll be attending that myself. I'm interested to see what he's doing. The CDF player for iOS, Rob Regay-Schofield, is going to be talking about that later today, and then we have talks tomorrow. Also coming out of stuff my group is doing with CDF deployment in general by Andre, and the Wolfram calculator that Jeremiah Cunningham is going to be giving.